Good afternoon. My name is Russell Kahn. I'm the editor-in-chief of News-O-Matic, and I'm here with three very talented, very creative, very passionate educators, Angie Zimmerman, Stacy Milchman, and Matt Leiser. Am I pronouncing that right, Matt? Great. And I'm speaking here from New York City, but our three teachers are from all over, Michigan, Florida, and Illinois, and Matt is in Illinois. So we're chatting from all over the country. I appreciate you joining us from Central Time, Matt. And I'm going to give us one more minute to let folks join in. It's just 4:01 before we get started, but I wanted to let everyone know that you are in the right place. And this is the News-O-Matic webinar. It's actually our second webinar. We did our first one in the spring, which then it was basically about engaging for the summer, how to prevent the summer slot, how to get kids reading. As you can tell in the red text on the screen there, today's focus is on engaging with informational text. So, and in case there are folks who are joining and don't know what that means, maybe I can let one of the educators explain it a little bit more deeply. But I think the layman term is, it's more or less nonfiction. It adds, there's directions and anything that, any text that is meant to inform, including directions or instructions, but also obviously newspapers, nonfiction books. Would you teachers say that's a fair assessment of what informational text means?
I would.
Yes.
All right, I'm doing something right. Okay. All right. Well, it's 4:02. So what I'll do is I'm just going to spend a minute just to introduce News-O-Matic, because some folks who are here may not know who we are and what we do. I'm not going to chat for too long, because to me, the point of this webinar is not to hear myself talk and to talk about News-O-Matic, but to hear from other educators about what works, what strategies they use to engage with nonfiction, how they get their kids reading. Ultimately, that's the goal that we all share. So let me just explain a little bit. News-O-Matic, we launched about almost 3 years ago now as an app. And so we started as an iPad app. Now we're on the iPhone, and now we're also on Android devices. We're on Kindle Fire. And a bit of exciting news is that we are going to be a web-based publication as well in the next few days, definitely this month. And that is great news for folks who come from classrooms that don't have tablet technology. There's a lot of schools out there that have Chromebooks or other laptops, but they don't have iPads or Androids, and so we really wanted to make sure that we always wanted to be platform agnostic, meaning it doesn't matter what you have, you should be able to have the opportunity to read daily news, daily current events. It's our belief here at News-O-Matic that is going to inspire children to love reading nonfiction, and ultimately get them to grow up to become empowered and conscientious global citizens. That's what News-O-Matic is. We're a daily newspaper. We publish every single weekday, Monday through Friday, 52 weeks a year. That includes Columbus Day, Christmas, New Year's Day, all summer long, 5 stories every single day. We try to create the daily routine of reading every single day, just to create that habit. And we do that with a range of stories. As you see on these stories, we cover things like elections, but we also cover, Volkswagen's lie about its emissions test, and we cover what's happening with animals and science and sports. We know that kids like to read all those different types of topics. So just to show you how that works, these are kids using our iPad app, 4th graders and 5th graders in different parts of the country. They seem to enjoy it. They seem to like our app. We try to cover high-interest nonfiction stuff that we know kids enjoy reading about, even if that's Minecraft. In fact, we're publishing in 56 minutes today, and there will be a new Minecraft story. And we did have a Taylor Swift story not that long ago, so we'll probably have another one at some point. So these are just kids, different parts of the country using it. It'll be great to see kids using the web as well. And one thing I think that really separates News-O-Matic from a lot of other news sites out there is our engagement. And for me, seeing that we get hundreds and hundreds of these drawings a day and hundreds of these comments from our readers, and these are actual comments, actual readers, saying, there's a 10-year-old saying, I'm not allowed to watch the news because it might be inappropriate, but now I can read and watch the news. Thanks so much. These are kids that actually now have a chance to learn what's happening in their world, and they're given the chance to write about it, to respond, and that is at the core of what we do. It's about engagement, which brings us back to what we're doing here today, which is engaging with informational text. And so before we even talk about the techniques that each of these three educators standing on my, by my sides here, what they use, I want to talk about why informational text, why it's important. And I think we all have our reasons, and I think we all believe it's important. But of course, one key reason is Common Core says so. At least for 43.5 states, that is the mandate that says that kids, and according to this chart here, and that's from Common Core, 50% of grade 4 students have to be reading informational text. I think 10 years ago, and probably even today, you look around a 4th grade classroom, there's not as much informational text. There's a lot of literature, a lot of fiction stories, and so there's a constant challenge of finding relevant nonfiction, finding informational text that will get kids interested in reading and get them actually reading. And then, as you can see here, reading 70% informational text by the time they graduate high school. 70% informational text. So this is important down to the elementary level. This is a key part of a kid's development, getting them to read informational text. And so I'm going to stop talking, and I'm going to introduce our panelists here. Now we've got Stacy's going to kick it off here, and then we have Angela Zimmerman and then Matt. I'm going to send out to everyone who has registered for the webinar the file that I'm sharing here, my presentation, so that we can all review the bios, review the information. And I do want to add as well that anybody who sticks it through the webinar and has questions, please send your questions at the end. And anyone who's here and would like a trial of NewsOMatic, you can have a 2-month pilot for your school, no strings attached. We just want everyone to have the chance to explore. So we're going to start us off here, like I said, with Stacy. Her teaching background is actually really interesting. As you read here, she actually taught in Pakistan and in Egypt for a couple of years, and then to Minnesota, and now she's in the Florida Keys. So that's a very interesting path.
Yeah.
So Stacy, I'll let you take it from here, and thank you so much for joining us on the webinar, and thanks so much for being here.
Okay, thank you. It's my pleasure. Okay, I just wanted to touch base on a few things that we do in 2nd grade. That's what I teach, but I've always taught like kindergarten, 1st grade, 2nd grade level. And I've always thought nonfiction and informational text was super important, so actually I love the Common Core focus on it because I think there's so much to do with it and it's so essential. Especially at kindergarten, 1st grade, 2nd grade level too. So my first slide just talks really about teaching nonfiction text features. That's something that we focus on in the younger grades. At the beginning, I'm really just talking about what is nonfiction, doing text set comparisons, comparing fiction to nonfiction books, and using Venn diagrams to compare and contrast similarities and differences. One great activity that I think is good for really any age, we do scavenger hunts, going through lots of resources. We use News-O-Matic, we use Scholastic or Time Readers, nonfiction books, magazines, and we look for all of the different text features that we're focusing on. We talk about how they help us as readers, what they teach us, and we make a huge class anchor chart, and then the students each make their own individual nonfiction text features notebook. And so they have their examples that they found, and they write what they've learned from that and how that helps. And I think that's a super important way to just introduce nonfiction and talk about how to utilize it. So next. And then some other things that we do, even at the K1-2 level, is close reading, and we use a lot of nonfiction text for that as well. Just today we used our red light, green light strategy, and I like to get the kids to interact with the text as much as possible, so I teach them at the beginning, just to a fun way to help students differentiate between what's important versus what is just interesting in nonfiction text, and we call it the red light, green light strategy. We underline things that are important in red and things that are just interesting in green, and that really helps them later on when I'm teaching main idea and details. And it's just a way to really get them used to focusing on what is important in nonfiction text. We also I teach them some grown-up stuff. They think that they're really neat when they get to learn about text marking and annotations in their text. So for example, I mean, we might use question marks for any confusing parts that they're reading in nonfiction, stars by anything that they find super important, exclamation points for interesting parts, and then that's a good way also to go back when we're looking for text evidence to answer questions and rereading information. Sorry. And a couple of great resources for that also, of course, are News-O-Matic. If you haven't heard of readworks.org, that is another free site that has lots of nonfiction printables that are great for teachers. And of course, Scholastic Time for Kids and Teachers Pay Teachers Too also has some good teacher-written information in nonfiction text. So next. And this is, I know a lot of teachers utilize graphic organizers. I think it's super important, though, just to make note of it because it's such a good way for students to interact with nonfiction text and to really make sure that they're understanding what they're reading. This is a photo, actually, of a News-O-Matic article that a student did, and we use a lot of nonfiction to really focus on the W questions and different graphic organizers for that, because that's a key thing that the younger kids really struggle with. So this was an article just last week with News-O-Matic that a student did a who, what, where, when, why graphic organizer with. And I think that they're just super important, so I wanted to make note of that to really encourage teachers to use these to help the students. Another thing that we do with the graphic organizers, I often have the students choose a topic that they are interested in and passionate about, and then they use graphic organizers to research and find information, and then they are able to put that information together in whatever way they would like to share. So some people might make a poster board with their information. I just had a student, we have iPads, we're fortunate enough to have them in the classroom. So I've had some students make different shows, like with Puppet Education, Show Me, which is like a whiteboard app that they can record their voice on. Sock Puppets is another great way. They love that one, and it just records the puppets talking back and forth, but they can just share the information that they're learning from the informational text that way. Okay, next. And I think in second grade, one of my students' favorite memories is when we bring our nonfiction learning to life, is what we call it. And we do different nonfiction writing pieces throughout the year, and where the students will choose a topic, they'll learn about whatever their topic is, and then they will take that learning, do some nonfiction writing. And then we actually share what we learn, and I think that's always really important. And we share what we learn with different audiences, our family and the students in the school and community members through creative ways. So we do like a living history wax museum, it's called, and my students each become a famous person that they want to research about and learn about, and they become experts on that person. And then they dress up as that person one day and they become a museum, and we have different audience members come in, and they have a little button that the students wear. They have to freeze until their button is pushed, and then they come to life and they get to teach the audience members all about themselves, who they have learned all about. And we also do that with animals. Right now we're just starting a big nonfiction unit and learning about different animals. They'll pick you know, whichever animal they're feeling very passionate about. I think it's really important to give students choices as well, so they're really invested in it. And then they will dress up as that animal and come, and we will do an animal zoo where we make big posters and share what we learned. And we do that also with Ellis Island as a reenactment, and weather reporters when we learn about weather, and there's lots of different ways that you can just bring it to life. I think it's really fun. And one nice thing that I know a lot of educators don't know about is KidRex, which is like a kid-safe Google search engine. And that's something that we use on our iPads, so that, you know, hopefully helps when they're researching on the iPads to keep it kid-friendly. So that's something to note. All right, and next. Next, please.
See the iPads and technology screen?
There we go. Okay, and then I mentioned earlier we're lucky to have iPads in the classroom, which really helps a lot. And I just found out about News-O-Matic last year, and we used it last year, and I absolutely love News-O-Matic. It's seriously one of my most favorite apps, just because it has, you know, it's all about the real world. So the kids can really talk about current events even with their family. They go home and share things that they've learned. And people are, you know, the families are amazed with what they're learning. So it can be used in so many different ways. One thing I have is I Wonder Wednesdays. So we're always focusing on nonfiction on I Wonder Wednesdays. And we use News-O-Matic often to, you know, like I mentioned before, answer W questions, write summaries of stories, share what we've learned. I use KidBlog. I have a class blog that we share and post and respond to News-O-Matic news stories. So the families can join in and see what they're learning as well. Wonderopolis is also another great website that we use that has lots of different informational text. It has a question, which is a wonder of the day, and the students can read through that, and it plays the text back just like News-O-Matic does, which I think is really key for the younger grade levels that are not always very strong in reading, so they can at least hear the text and follow along, and then they are able to learn about that wonder, and then they report back or share in some way. So there's one example you'll see of one of my students in I Wonder that we did last Wednesday, and she was my ESOL student, and she really wanted to know how gummy bears were made, and so that is an example of what she did. So, and next.
Well, I asked Stacy to share with me a couple of photographs from her students using some of these techniques. So there are just two pictures here, and I'll let you explain what's happening in this one and the next one, Stacy.
This is actually my son, and he was in the other second grade class last year, and this was from our animal zoo. All of the second graders got together in the PE, the multi-purpose room, and you can kind of see just a corner of his poster, but they had huge posters that they made that shared all of their learning. And then they dressed up, and he learned about killer whales and became an expert at that. So we had lots of different classes, and parents come through and look at their work, and they reported what they learned about their animal. And then if you go to the next one, that is a picture of one of my students from the Living History Museum, and she was Jane Goodall. And she learned all about Jane Goodall. They bought books. She fell in love with Jane Goodall and wants to become her when she grows up now. And then these are some other students that are just coming through, and she's sharing her report and what she learned. And you could see her little Wax Museum press button on her shoulder there. So those are just a couple of examples.
Thank you so much, Stacy. Those are great. I love seeing the photographs. I like seeing kids become teachers. I like seeing, you know, you're flipping the experience, and that's a great way to bring nonfiction to life. So that's a great tip. Thank you. Also, you know, graphic organizers. We try to provide those every day in our teacher guide, and of course our app lets people users color code the text. So I think that's really interesting that you've created a model where red, you have red and green, and each mean different things. So it's not, you have a system in place that your kids can all follow.
Yeah, thank
That's
you.
wonderful. Next up, we've got Angela Zimmerman. Now, and Angie, I love your story. You can read the little bio there. But she taught for a few years, and then she took, how many years off did you have? Was your hiatus, Angie?
I taught for 6 years, and then I took 16 years off to be a stay-at-home mom. So, and then I've been back now. This is my third year.
So 16 years off from the field of teaching, you can imagine things change quite a bit. What I like about Angie is that she came back into teaching after, she taught in the 90s and then came back a couple of years ago. And then, rather than being a bit fearful of the new technology and intimidated, she seemed to embrace it. And so as a result, she's actually been on the forefront of ways to integrate technology into the classroom, ways to get her kids to be really learning and passionate about reading through technology. So it's a pretty cool story you have here, Angie.
Thank you.
So I'll flip. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I did. I started teaching in 1991, and I knew that I wanted to spend time home with my kids. So after that happened, I obviously knew that technology had changed tremendously. When I taught in 91, there wasn't I had, a landline, and I think that we shared down the hall. So I didn't even have my own phone. So things have obviously changed, but I knew that I wanted, and just having my own children, that I wanted technology to be really important in my classroom. And when I started 3 years ago, I couldn't find enough nonfiction. I was struggling to find nonfiction for my classroom. One of my strengths is getting kids to read, and I felt like I was doing a good job at getting kids to read fiction, but I wasn't doing a good job getting kids to read nonfiction. So just on my own, I started studying different places, and I found other places like the Wonderopolis and the Book Flicks and Mel for Kids, different places that had things. But when I saw News-O-Matic, I was like instantly drawn to that. And at the end of the school year, they had like a little bit of a time frame where you could try it out, and we tried it out. And then I begged and begged and begged, and then got a grant and all that kind of stuff to get it for our classroom. So I knew that having 50% at 4th grade, that's the grade that I teach, that 50% of the reading was supposed to be nonfiction, and that wasn't happening in my room when I started. So I used different programs like RAS and different things, but I wanted something that every day applied to my classroom, and I wanted the news, and because I felt like it was pertinent to what was happening. And so when I found News-O-Matic, very quickly attached to it. And one of the things that I loved the most was, on this slide you can see that you can level it, and I felt like that was huge. So I just want to show how I went across that process. Our school uses the Fontes and Pinnell, so when we go through and we have our students read to us each year, we can figure out, and various times through the year, we can find out what Lexile that matches up to. And this is just off the RAS website, but it has the reading recovery, the DRA, which our school used to use, and it gives some good indications, I think, of where you can actually put kids. So I use this in figuring out my classroom, and my kids are now Lexiled level to where they are reading. And what I love about it is they have no idea that I've done this. They don't know that one is reading at a higher level than someone else. They all think they're reading the same article. My classroom is 1-to-1, so I'm very blessed to have that in my classroom. So the kids don't even realize that they're, when they go on, that they're reading something different than somebody else. And I just took a little snippet on the other side of that's just my classroom. Probably the average in my classroom is the middle range, but then there's definitely kids in the lower range and the higher range in my classroom as well. So that's just a little snippet in my classroom without the names attached. But I feel like that really promotes a lot of nonfiction, and I use News-O-Matic in the morning. To me, that's the best time for my class. I have a reading time later in the day where we have state standards guidelines that we're supposed to do, but I didn't feel like in those guidelines there was enough informational. So this is, to me, a place where I can add it on. So when kids come into my classroom in the morning, I say, and different days do different things according to the day, which of course all teachers do. Some days I might just say go on and read a quick article. Some days I get on and say I want you to read a certain article because it goes with what we're doing. I might some days have them answer questions. Some days I add on my own questions. And then other days, and probably about once a week, and it's their favorite day, is I allow them to pick any article that they want and create something from that article. And in a few minutes I'll show you what my kids have come up with. But I feel like that using it in the morning for me is just it's a great time. It's adding on to what we're doing later in the day with what we're required to do. So, but you can go to the next slide. So this is just a screenshot of my classroom, and since this I've changed it a little bit, but my last name is Zimmerman, so we have to make a name that's unique to us. So every kid in my classroom has a number, so there's Zim-Zim-1, Zim-Zim-2. Since this, we've changed it to Zim-Zim and then their name, because they can't always remember who's number 14 or who's number 12, because they like to write comments back and forth to each other. I strongly encourage them to, comment on what somebody else is saying. So I love, probably my favorite is when there's things on sports teams, because the boys get on there and start talking a little smack back and forth to each other about teams and games, and I I love that, because I feel like they're taking it and they're making it real world. They're applying it to what's important at their home or in their own life. So so the kids come on, and not every day, but quite often I'll have them come on and respond to an article that they're reading and tell me what they think about it. There are times I'll give specific assignments, and sometimes I just tell them to get on and enjoy themselves and comment back and forth. And I tell them it's kind of like when you sit around the family. When my family sits around, we used to sit around and talk about the news at the dinner table. This is them doing the same thing. I want them to talk about the news and that it should be pertinent to what's happening in their world. So, so that's kind of what we do there.
Just before I get to the next slide for a second, Angie, I'm sorry to interrupt. I see that there's one of our viewers has her hand raised.
Yes.
Nancy. So, but I just want to say that let's. I think we should finish this presentation, and then we're just going to do a whole big Q&A afterwards, if that's okay with everyone. And I think Angie's only got a couple slides left, so then we'll just wrap up, and then we'll do all the questions then, if that's okay.
Perfect. So the next one, I just wanted to show that there are definitely the Common Core questions are on here, and for me that's really important, because we have to show that we're teaching the Common Core, and then we have to associate which ones are going with which lessons. We have to put that into our lesson plans. So this works perfect because I can just attach it to that. And then the other feature that I like about it, and you can just see down at the bottom, is that you can add your own questions. And so sometimes I make up silly ones, and sometimes I make up ones that that they can actually, that I want them to write a full paragraph, or I want them to write a response to, and we can take a screenshot of it, and they can print it, or they can do an assignment that way. But this I loved this one. Who in this class would be good at making something for the Makers Fair? And the little girl was like, me. I'm the one. And I love that, because they're responding to what it's happening and what they think about it. And I would say I have a little picture there also of the class login, and that's where I would encourage anyone to make sure that the kids can see where to put their name in, to make it so it's applicable to, so that they can see who the person is, because for the class chat, the kids love to know who it is. So I just, I think that you want to make it so that they can see. And I love also that they have the right and wrong answers, so you can see what the kids are getting right and what the kids are getting wrong, and what type of questioning that is. If it's consistently the same types of questions that they're getting wrong, that we can see and figure out what we can do to help that. So the next slide shows just the slide from the Makers Fair and with the kids, the Maker Movement. And so this was the day when I had that question on there, but also there was an article on shielding sea turtles. And what I had done this day was I told the kids they could pick any article that they pleased, and they could do whatever they would demonstrate their learning and then research for more learning. And so my kids at 4th grade, they're a little bit more tech savvy, so they could, I had kids that made iMovies, I had kids that made keynotes, kids that were making things on educations and different things like that, so that they could make actual things to share and show other people. And I think that's really important. I have another student that's a special needs student, and the article that he attached to, there was a blood moon article, and one of the things that we associated with him, he needs to have little brain breaks during the day. He became the expert on the blood moon, and during the course of the week before that, he went to each classroom as a part of his brain break, and to tell people that the blood moon was happening, and to look on his News-O-Matic article and explain that. And he became the little teacher. And for him, it was a huge deal to talk in front of other people, but he was so excited. He's special needs and cares a whole lot about planets and the weather, so that's his go-to thing. So this was a great little way for him to teach other people about something and showing the article. So I think it's important for us to make kids become the teachers and kids to become the ones that are the experts. And so the next video is of a little girl in my classroom, little soft-spoken little girl, and she was interested in these sea turtles, and she wanted to make a video about them. And so she looked up other information off what she got from News-O-Matic, and then she Googled and looked other places, and I think it's awesome because then she wanted to learn more. So I'll let you play the video.
People are blocking sea turtles from making their eggs on the Costa Rica beach. The government told the people of Costa Rica Beach that they could only stay on it for 30 seconds so they wouldn't hurt the moms or the baby sea turtles hatching. And so, since the government made that rule, everybody has been following it and helping the baby sea turtles hatch. That is the end of my presentation. Thank you, and bye.
That is so wonderful to watch, Angie. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, so that's the neat thing. I feel like the kids can do keynote presentations, which is the same as a PowerPoint, only on an iPad, and they can do, you know, just any type of creation that they want and make it their own, and then share it with other people. And I think all of a sudden nonfiction becomes a whole lot more interesting when it's something you want to learn about, and then you have the opportunity to share, and then kids take the whole package and put it together and add in their text features, and they add in all of the things that we want, you know, for them to get out of a nonfiction book. So
it's wonderful, Angie. Thank you. I just wanted you to know that when we got that video of the sea turtle, that our whole staff watched it together, and
that's great.
they all cheered, and you know, it's pretty fun to see something that we work on here get turned into something greater and expanded on by other readers.
Well, it happens on a very regular basis in my classroom, where the kids take something and turn it into. So it's a neat process.
Okay, so I'm going to move on to Matt. Looks like my screen is frozen. Is everyone folks seeing my face frozen in one slot?
Yes.
All right. Well, I'll see what I can do, but in the meantime, I'm going to get Matt to get started here, and then I'll see if I can get my webcam working. So, Matt, I think one of the things that's really interesting about what you're doing is you're teaching in I think the whole entire district is one-to-one. Downers Grove is one of the real premier, one-to-one iPad districts in the country. And you know, you're an Apple Distinguished Educator, so you're doing a lot of work with that. I'll let you talk a little bit about your background as well, and then we can launch into your PowerPoint here.
Sure. Thanks, Russ. I've actually, this is my 11th year teaching. I taught first grade for several years, and then I got married and moved to Downers Grove and have been teaching second grade since. So yes, I am an Apple Distinguished Educator. So that was kind of exciting for me. I received that actually just in, I believe it was April or May of last year. So that was pretty exciting for me. And we are a one-to-one iPad district, which is very special, and we're very fortunate to have these wonderful pieces of technology in the hands of the kids. They are in this one-to-one program is a take-home program, so they are allowed to bring the iPads home with them each night, and they bring them to school with themselves each day. So that's kind of unique, I guess, as far as my background goes and the students with these iPads. So Russ, if you want to jump to the next page. Okay, so I'm going to spend kind of a fair amount of time talking about some of the different tools I use to engage the kids with nonfiction here at school and at home as well. So the first, obviously, is News-O-Matic. I've been using it for the past couple years. I actually stumbled across this app when I was actually just in the App Store a couple years ago, and I came across News-O-Matic, tapped on it, looked like something incredible, and showed it to my students the next day. Tons of kids went home, downloaded it on their iPads, and they've loved it ever since. So what's so cool about this is we're actually fortunate to do an editor-in-chief session with Russ, and my class got to talk with him and help pick the news for the next day, and they thought that was just such an incredible experience. But some things that not only are the stories engaging, and you can change their level according to Lexile, and all the kids think they are, reading the same article just at a different level, and the kids don't know. I think that's really powerful. But some of the things that the kids really like is they like the Write to Russ feature, and shortly after we had our discussion, one of my students, Lily, who you can actually see down there at the bottom, in the bottom corner there, she actually wrote Russ, and he found her comment, which was pretty exciting to see as well. So what my kids do, they use it at the beginning of the day. So when they come into the classroom, one of the first things they do is grab their iPads and open up News-O-Matic. They take about 5 to 7 minutes, I would say, and they just read a story that's interesting to them. I then ask kids who would be willing to stand up, mirror their iPads, and share that article with the class. So they then stand up and they kind of take on that role of the teacher, and they start kind of telling us a little bit about what the article was about. And kids will ask them questions and that type of a thing. So that's really fun. My students love that. And they also use it for Daily 5. So Daily 5, if you're not familiar with it, it's basically a classroom management system that we use here in a sense. It structures the reading block. And one of the pieces to Daily 5 is Read to Self. So kids will continue to read News-O-Matic even during Read to Self, which is pretty exciting. And at home, they'll go home and they will share these articles with their parents. And parents will occasionally email me and tell me this is just the greatest app ever, and they had some great discussions about it at home, and really, really powerful app. So if you don't have this one, you gotta get it. But
Thanks, Matt.
kids love that one. So can you go to the next slide, Russ? So we also use Reading A to Z. When kids come and read with me at my guided reading table here, that's kind of how we use it for guided reading. And A to Z has done a phenomenal job of integrating nonfiction onto their website. So basically, what I like about it is I can take a book that's leveled, and I will distribute it to all my students. They will then take that book and put it on their iPads into the iBooks app. So essentially what they're doing is they're building a collection of nonfiction text that they can go back and reread later if they choose to do so. What I like about using A to Z is the fact that on the iPads they can zoom in, the pictures are in color, which is really awesome. The kids love that. And they're building that collection of books at their level that they can read as well. So Russ, you want to go to the next slide? Kind of a spin-off or a branch off of that, we also use Kids A to Z. And Kids A to Z does contain a lot of the same books that are in Reading A to Z. So what I try to do is I really try hard not to kind of double up on those books. So, and when I say that, what I mean is Kids A to Z does not necessarily have a list like Reading A to Z. So all the titles that are in Reading A to Z are not in Raz Kids, or Kids A to Z as they call it now. So if that makes sense. So essentially what they'll do is I assign them books based upon their level. They will go in, and you can see based on that picture in the upper left-hand corner, each book is broken into 3 parts. And the first part is they'll listen to the story. So in 2nd grade, the kids, hearing that story read, that's a really powerful thing, especially in regards to reading fluency. The second time they go through that book, you'll see it's a little eyeball, and that means they read that story on their own. And then the very last thing they do is they actually take a quiz. It consists of 5 questions that they answer over the story. I can't remember exactly what score they need to get in order to receive a little check mark saying that they passed it, but if they do not, they need to go back, read that book again, and then go back and take the quiz one more time until they get a passing score on that quiz. Another piece that I really like to this as well is if you look in the bottom left picture there, you'll notice there's a little microphone feature. That microphone feature is nice because when kids are reading the story to themselves, they can actually read the story aloud. So what the kids will do is they will maybe step out in the hallway, or they will find a quiet place to go and read that story. And they record themselves reading that story, and when they're done, they submit it to me. So that way at home or at school, I can go on and I can listen to those kids read that story, and I can be checking their fluency and seeing where they're making mistakes and those types of things along the way. So that's another tool that we use here in the classroom and at home. Kids will go on at home as well. Next slide. So the next slide that's going to be popping up here is PebbleGo. And PebbleGo is something I actually stumbled upon about a year ago. We started doing Genius Hour in our classroom. And if you're not familiar with Genius Hour, basically what I've done with it is I've taken about 30 minutes, I would say, once a week for the kids to explore a topic that they are interested in. When I first started doing this with the kids, I found that they had a little trouble picking topics and things like that. So what I did is I kind of narrowed it down in a sense that I picked the category or the topic that I'd like them to research, and they can go on and go from there. So one of the categories that we have done for Genius Hour is animals. And when the students log into PebbleGo, there are tons of different animals for the students to click on. So when they click on the animal, it's broken up into different sections then. So what they can do is they can find out what the animal likes to eat, where they live, fun facts about them. And none of these passages are real long. So that's kind of nice. It also has a read to feature, so it can read to them for some of those kids who may need that. But then what they do is they, at the very end, after they've gone through and they've read it and they've taken some notes, they'll basically, any way they choose, show the class what it is they learned. So some kids will choose to make posters, some will do iMovies, that type of a thing. So what you see in the pictures here, in the top right-hand corner of this slide, this is one of the students, and this is kind of a little picture of what it looks like. There's real photographs in there, there's a short little video clip, and then what they do is they just take notes on things that they've read about. And then down in the left-hand corner, that's a boy actually who chose to do a poster, and he's talking about some of the things that he read about and learned about within PebbleGo, and he's sharing that with the rest of the class. So kids will go on this sometimes for Daily 5 here at school during Read to Self time, Genius Hour, and sometimes they'll even go on at home to do additional reading there. Next slide. PebbleGo Next, this is kind of just a spin-off of PebbleGo, but this one is more for grades 3 through 6, whereas the other, just PebbleGo, is more for your emergent readers. And so this is really broken down into 2 categories, states and tribes. And we actually did use this when we did some state research. That was one of our Genius Hour topics as well. So kids went in, and there's tons of great facts here that the kids were able to read through in regards to states, you know, the state song, fun facts about the states, those types of things. So that was just a really nice resource, and I won't talk too much more about that because it is so similar to the other PebbleGo. But this one's just more focused on states and tribes. Next. Next we have NewsElla, and this is actually one that I stumbled upon more recently. So in addition, and I'd say this, this is another nice resource. However, there are some things that I might change it if I were to revamp this. But basically what this is NewsElla takes real articles from the Chicago Tribune, New York Times, popular newspapers, and what they do is they transform it and break it down into different reading levels. So it's cool from that sense, but what I don't like is how the kids are leveled. The way that they're leveled is based upon the quiz that they take. So the kids do have to take quizzes once they've finished reading the article, which I think is great, but that then determines where they're reading, which I've noticed that hasn't always lined up as far as Lexile goes. With this, kids can change their Lexile, which does kind of make up for that. But I really would prefer if I were able to assign those Lexiles and kids were not able to maneuver those on their own. Because every once in a while you do get your students who want to kind of play around with those and see how they are different. But the stories on here are great, and the way that they've broken them down by Lexile, it is good as long as the kids aren't playing with it. So we use this during guided reading when they're sitting with me in a small group at the table. This has been another nice resource that we've been able to use. The last one here is iBooks Author. And iBooks Author is, I actually was on the Apple's website about a year ago, and I came across a story from an educator there by the name of Christy Musey, and she's a kindergarten teacher out of South Carolina, and something that she started doing was creating leveled books for her students. And the way that she went about doing that was through iBooks Author. So I love that idea. I thought she was doing some really incredible things there. So I started doing that as well. So if I can't find a book at one of my students' levels, as far as something that they're really interested in, what I will do is I will go into iBooks Author or even the Book Creator app, and I will actually write a book tailored to student interests at their level. So the nice thing about this is I have control over the stories and those types of things that I give them. I can put in videos, I can put in maps, I can photos, and I can put in multiple photos for them to scroll through on here. And I can even put quizzes at the end, which is really nice as well. So that's something a little more recently that I started doing within the past year. And my kids absolutely love them. They go home, they show their parents, and they read them to their parents at home, and that's really exciting to see as well. So those are just some of the tools that I've used with my students so far as nonfiction goes.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Matt. I appreciate you taking the time to put together these slides and to talk to all of us about what works for you in your classroom.
You bet.
I said we would do a little Q&A here at the end. So we have about 10 minutes left until the end of the hour. So we have a couple of written questions which I'll get to, and I encourage anybody else here who has any more questions about anything, about any topic that we've covered today, anything else about informational text, you can actually write your questions to me, and I'll share them with our panel. But Nancy Long has her hand raised, so I'm going to see if I can enable her audio. And Nancy, if you're with us, you can actually ask the question yourself. So I've now enabled your audio, and if you want to ask your question, go ahead. Nancy? Okay. All right. Well, if she wants to write the question in, I'll see if she can answer. So let me read some of my questions here. My first question is from someone named Tabitha, and she asks she says that a lot of her readers tend to gravitate towards particular types of stories. She says, do you think it's important to diversify the topics? So I don't know, any of you can handle that question.
Of course, the kids are going to go to the wacky articles and the Minecraft articles and the Taylor Swift articles. And I think that just like me, if you give me a newspaper, I'm going to go to the things that interest me first. And then after that, then I'll read maybe some articles. I feel like we need to treat kids the same way. We need to let them read the things that interest them, the things that they want to read, and then I think after that we do need to give diversity. I remember the town that I live in is very Lutheran, and so kids were like, what's the Pope? And of course we were like, well, let's read about it. And so that was, very important, because I think it's important for the kids to know about what's happening in their world, but it's not the article that they probably were drawn to read. They want to read more about, the other things first. But I think we're the same way. So I think that that's why I specifically on certain days will say, okay, today read whatever you want. And another day I might say, okay, I want everyone to read this article and this article, because I think that that's important too, that we give them some diversity and give them, open up their world to other things of what's happening. So that's my opinion.
That's a good answer. Anybody else?
I think
Yeah,
she
okay.
said it all. That was great.
Yeah. So I have a question here from a teacher named Sasha, and she's writing in from Maine. And actually, this might be a good question for Matt, because Matt, you talked about something in terms of NewsElla and creating the Lexile level for students. So she asks, how do you know what Lexile level a reader should be at, and how do you know it's time for him or her to graduate to the next level?
Yeah, so I'll take that question, and I think Angie, you kind of touched on this too. We use the Fontes and Pinnell here as well, but that nice conversion chart that you showed, we use that as well. So when the kids first come in, especially beginning of the year, second grade, I'll just do a running record with them, Fontes and Pinnell, and I'll just go to the conversion chart from there after I found their reading level, and I just follow that over, and I just find the Lexile level over on the side that best matches with that reading level.
And Matt, just out of curiosity, your students, are they all different levels?
They come in at all different reading levels. In second grade, our hope is that they'll be at least at a J reading level. So then you follow that over on the Lexile, and you can find out exactly what that is. But not all kids are there. So basically, my job is to just move them along as best I can, and I just meet them where they're at and do the best I can to keep pushing them along. And they still enjoy reading and keep them engaged.
I have our question from Nancy now, and she asks, are any of these apps across platforms, such as laptops, etc.? I'll answer for NewsOMatic, and basically, as I explained in the intro, we started as an iPad app. We're now across mobile devices, iOS, Android, and Kindle Fire, and in the next few days, basically within the week or so, we're going to be a web-based. So we want it to be platform agnostic. Now, maybe you, Stacy and Angie and Matt, you can answer as to whether the resources you're using are only on some devices or others, and if maybe you found frustration because of that.
Okay, well, I mean, it depends on what you're talking about, but a lot of the things that I use, we have iPads, so there have been a couple of things that have not worked on iPads in the past that have been a little frustrating. But for the most part, the things that we're using work on iPads, or I have an HP, the Windows system, as my teacher computer. So, I mean, it's kind of hard to answer because it depends on what it is, really.
Yeah.
So
Matt or Angie, I don't know.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Wonderopolis, a few of those different ones. What we do, even if they're web-based, we add them to our home screen, and so like iPads, so that the kids don't have to type that in all the time. So my kids, if they go to, like, for instance, Wonderopolis, we at the very beginning of the year take the places, the websites that we're going to go to often, we add them to our home screen so that they don't have to keep typing it in. So that's something that we can do, and it makes things just a little bit easier. So if anything's web-based.
Right. We very similar. So all of these things, I mean, to answer the question, it will work on an iPad, and it will work on a computer, PC or Apple, Chromebook, those types of things. The only thing I can't really speak to is Android devices. I'm not sure whether all of these resources can be accessed through an Android device, but I'm assuming so, especially if it is web-based.
One thing that I think I would look into, depending on what state you're in, I'm from Michigan, but we have it's called MEL for Kids, M-E-L, and it's like Michigan's e-library, and my guess is that other states would have the same thing. But you could Google MEL for Kids or whatever your state is, and our state has tried to put a lot of the different sites all on one place. So where you can go to Wonderopolis, Bookflix, can't even think of all of them off the top of my head, but they're on that site. So we add Mel for Kids to our homepage, and then the kids can open that right up, and then there's all the different options that the e-library has tried to put together so that kids can research things in a safe way. So, and my guess is that other states have probably done the same thing.
Great.
That's really helpful advice, especially, Andrea. I love the idea of making a bookmark, from the website, and essentially it looks like an app. It looks like an app on.
The kids actually think it is an app. When you try to explain it's not, they tell you it is. But yeah.
Absolutely. I think the bigger challenge is apps that aren't websites, and that's why we have been working for months and months and months to develop our website. Because it was frustrating for schools that didn't have the tablet technology to restrict them, restrict their access. So it's 4:56. So I've got one last question here, and that is from Annabelle, who asks that she's referring to Matt's discussion of the junior editor-in-chief, and she wants to know, how can I get my kids to be junior editor-in-chief? And I'll answer that, and that's get in touch with us. We do. Last year we did that almost every week. We tried to engage students with the news selection process. We would do a similar situation what we're doing right now. We would do a live Skype, try to engage the kids and have them vote on the stories they think we should choose for that day's edition. And it's a pretty empowering activity for kids to realize that their voice matters and that they get to vote for that day's edition of News-O-Matic. So just contact me at info@pressforkids.com, and I'm going to wish everybody a fantastic day and week ahead, and thank you everyone for all your help.
All right, thanks, Russ.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody.
Thank you.